Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Andrea and I'm the Teen Services Coordinator here at Mesa County Libraries. And today I'm going to be showing you about our latest Teen Take and Make kit. This one is for bleeding tissue paper painting. It is not quite as metal as it sounds. There is no actual blood involved. The reason it's called that is because bleeding tissue paper is a special type of tissue paper that's designed when it's got water on it for the colors to bleed out dramatically. So this can add some really nice features when you're wanting to do a watercolor technique without actually having to have watercolors. So it's very, very simple, very basic, but again, like a lot of techniques that are simple and basic, you can do really complex, interesting things with it. So I'm just going to be showing you how that works. And one of the things I wanted to mention too, this Take and Make kit is available from July 17th to July 31st while supplies last. There are kits distributed to every one of our library locations. So if you're up in Colburn or Gateway, there are a number of kits there. You might want to check ahead of time and see if there are actually some available because it is a while supplies last thing. But let's get started here. All right, so this is the kit that you should be receiving. And in our kit, we're going to have a set of instructions. We're going to have 2 sheets of watercolor paper. We're going to have multiple squares of the bleeding tissue paper that are going to stick like wild to your plastic bag because static electricity. So, okay, it's getting off my fingers, good. You're going to have a paintbrush and you're going to have a white crayon. So the basic, and then what you're gonna need to have at home is you're gonna need to have some container of water. So in my case, I've got a cup of water. Things that I would recommend having are a pair of scissors, not required, but I think it can create some fun techniques. Or instead of the water and paintbrush method, you could do a spray bottle. It's just whatever you prefer and whatever you have available, but I actually think that the paintbrush method works pretty well myself. All right, so first thing first, you're gonna wanna find a flat surface that you can work on, preferably something if you're worried about your colors seeping through that you can lay down some newspapers or something like that. I actually meant to bring that, but I forgot. So we're gonna proceed ahead and I'm just gonna not get too wild with the water here. All right. So first thing, I'm gonna notice that there are 2 different textured sides to my watercolor paper. I'm gonna have my rougher side up. You could experiment and see what you wanna do. I just think that the rougher side captures the colors a little better as they bleed through. All right. Then you're gonna get your cup of water and you're gonna get your paintbrush. And the first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna dampen this entire sheet of paper or wherever you think you're gonna work. I actually skipped a step there. So before, one of the things that you have to decide before you proceed is whether you want to draw on your watercolor paper. So some people, I've seen some fun techniques where people use the white crayons to create a relief pattern before they apply their watercolors. So the white crayon prevents that watercolor coloring from soaking into the paper. So you can create some fun patterns with your white crayon. I've also seen people use like black ink pens to do a cool design on there as well. So, you know, you can get really creative and really interesting with that, but this is the point. Before you dampen the paper, you have to decide what you want to do with that. I think I'm gonna try and do the white crayon. I don't have very many artistic abilities, which is part of why I like this craft, is because it doesn't rely on me having innate artistic abilities, but you know, the only way that you get better at things is if you practice. So I'm gonna try something. Let's see, I might just write my name. I've also seen some fun where people do like vines and leaves, so maybe I'll try that. Okay, I'll just do my name because that's easy. I'd recommend, if you decide to go the crayon route, to do not just right once. You're gonna put some real pressure on your crayon without breaking it, of course. And then you're gonna trace over your letters a couple of times just because this is a rougher texture on this paper, so it's not gonna go on smoothly with your wax crayon. Okay, so I've written my name on there just because that's easy enough to do. You probably aren't able to see that, but just in case that you can, I have written that a couple of times on there. And like I said, you're gonna wanna trace over that a couple of times just to make sure that your wax is really getting applied so you don't have any like weird gaps. All right, so now that I've drawn on there, now I'm going to moisten the paper. And so I would really recommend try not to get too much water on there. You don't want this to be saturated. You don't want it to get soggy. You just want it to get damp enough because what's gonna happen is we're gonna put our paper on next. So you want it to be able to stick to the paper and start soaking. So you wanna have just enough water on there to get that done. So I'm actually gonna try my spray bottle too and see how that method works. So that can be a little faster. I still recommend following up, even if you decide to go the spray bottle method, is follow up with your paintbrush just to make sure it's getting applied all over. Right. So yeah, as you can see, it's fairly damp now, but it is not soaking. Like when I flip it over, the water hasn't really soaked through the other side. That's kind of the effect we're looking for. Unfortunately, watercolor paper is designed for that. So the next thing you need to decide to do is you have all of these pre-cut squares of tissue paper. You have to decide, do you want to do different shapes besides your squares? So, you know, that can also be something that gets kind of interesting. I've seen some cool like confetti effects where you rip this up into really tiny pieces. You could also do different geometrical shapes like triangles or circles, you know, hexagons, dodecahedrons, if you're feeling really creative, which is a 20-sided figure. That requires a bit more patience than I have. So I think I might just do some triangles myself. So, and again, not required, it's simply what you wanna do. All right, so put a triangle in there. And as you can see, because the paper is already moistened, that tissue paper is sticking better than if I was just laying it on the surface. Okay, I think, ooh, I like this orange. I think I'm gonna do a confetti effect with this orange, so I'm just gonna rip it up. Kinda push it on there. Doesn't really wanna stick too well with the little pieces, so you might have to encourage it a little bit. And just be aware, once you do start putting your fingers on the paper, the tissue paper, there's a good chance you're gonna get some color bleeding onto your fingers. So just be aware of that if you decide to go that route. But I think most creative processes require getting a little bit messy. But I know not everyone wants that to be the case. So let's see, okay, I've got some triangles. One of the other things that can be fun about this process is you can actually layer different colors together and get a new color. So I could layer, you know, my blue and my red and get purple, you know, classic color mixing theory. Just be aware that when you are layering pieces, that if you decide to get really hardcore about layering, at a certain point when you mix too many colors, you are just gonna probably get like brown or a blackish color, which if it's what you're going for, awesome. But just be aware of that. Okay, so I think I am gonna layer I'm gonna rearrange some of my confetti pieces here because I do wanna layer a red and a blue. My paper's starting to dry out a little bit, so I might have to reapply a little here. A little bit of water just here and there. Let's see. Okay, I think I'll put the blue on top of the red and the green. So that's what we've got so far. Ooh, I really like this green blue. Let's do. Couple there. So yeah, this is just the part where your imagination gets to flow free. As you can see, it's a really basic technique, but again, you could apply a lot of different qualities and features to it to make it something really interesting. I would recommend, if you're curious, to try and look up some different examples of bleeding tissue paper paintings. There's some really neat ones online. Like I've seen a really beautiful, where somebody used a black ink pen to draw some leaves, and then they used different greens and blues on top of that drawing. They used different greens and blues tissue paper on top of it, and it created this really gorgeous effect. So, all right, I think I'm gonna put some yellow in there, and I think then I'm gonna call it good. But yeah, just remember, the more colors you put on, oftentimes the more interesting it can look. But it depends if you're really going for kind of a sparse look or not. Just because I'm moving kind of fast today. So as you can tell, this is not necessarily a great work of art, but that is part of the joy of it, is that I don't necessarily have to have a great artistic vision to have something fun come out of this. All right, so now that we're done with that part, now what we're gonna do is we're gonna use our paintbrush or our spray bottle again, and now we're going to get all of this paper even damper. Like we're gonna apply a layer of water on top of the paper that we just put on there. And this is just to make sure that that paper gets saturated so it's actually really bleeding its colors through. So I'm gonna start doing that. And you'll notice, if you're doing the paintbrush method, that as I'm brushing the water on there, there's actually dye coming off if I'm going past the edge here. That's coming onto the paper. So if you wanted to, that's something that you could get creative with and be like, okay, well now I've got this color in here. I'm going to, you know, apply that in other places and kind of take advantage of that. I don't think I'm going to get into that right now, just because of interest of time. I want you to see kind of what this is going to look like. But I do want you to know that that's an option. You can really play around with this. Okay. Again, just to give you another perspective of what that's looking like. So this is the paper that's totally saturated. At this point, this paper is still just dry up here. It needs to get more water. Because what happens is if you don't actually get it completely saturated, it's not going to really bleed very much, and you're not going to get the results maybe that you were hoping for. Just depends what you're looking for. Okay. So as you can see, I've layered that red and that blue there, so you can see they're kind of bleeding together and it's creating a new kind of purple. It's not really the purple I was hoping for, but we'll see what it looks like when I actually take the paper off. Okay. Just got a few of those confetti pieces to go, and then we'll be done. All right, so that's kind of what it looks like when it's done. As you can tell, it definitely looks very saturated at this point. I'm not really worrying about the rest of the color paper. I'm just getting the pieces of tissue paper I put on top. That's my concern right now. And then at that point, you just need to wait for it to dry as long as you can. Pretty much is what I tell people, is if you have the patience for it, let it dry as long as you can. I actually have a piece over here that I'm going to show you what it looks like when the tissue paper is dry. I did this a couple days ago. As you can see, some of the tissue paper already came off before I was done. And you know, it kind of came off in transit because it was pretty dry. So, but let me go ahead and peel the rest of this here. Okay, so as you can see, I didn't completely get the paper saturated like I hoped, because I've definitely got some gaps here where there was a piece of tissue paper. See another one here. Yeah, so it didn't really come out the way that I was hoping it to. So something to keep in mind, if when in doubt, you know, feel free to apply a little bit more water. But yeah, see how nice those tissue pieces are coming off. Ooh, that circle came off really nice. Got some good color saturation there. Oh, and that blue hardly did anything. Bummer. Oh, but I got this some interesting color mixing going on with the reds and the greens and the blues. I actually kind of like how that turned out. Okay, let's see. Did that pink actually come off? Sometimes it's hard to tell after it's been a while if there's still paper on there because it kind of blends into it. I actually know some people, they never take the tissue paper off because they just like how it looks with it on. But I think that's part of the fun of it, is getting to peel it off and see what it looks like. So as you can see, we did have some gaps there, some things that didn't quite turn out the way that I hoped, so that's kind of a bummer. But what I'm gonna do too is I'm gonna show you what it looks like too if you do decide to take the tissue paper off wet. Again, that's a stylistic choice. Just know, again, this is gonna probably stain my fingers pretty good because these are wet. They're actively bleeding colors into the paper. So I'm probably gonna have multicolored fingers by the end of this. All right, so let's see what happens here. So as you can see, because I was trying to grab that corner of the pink paper and this paper, watercolor paper is wet, I actually tore the watercolor paper here a little bit, just a tiny bit. So something to keep in mind too when you're working with this when it's wet is that it is probably you're running the risk of the paper tearing. So, you know, proceed with caution. Ooh, but I got a really nice bleed there on the tissue paper because I really made sure it was saturated. So that pink actually turned out really pretty. It's hard to get the tissue paper off when it's this wet still. Oh, and the nice thing is you can see too that the crayon actually did its work. I've got that nice little A in my last letter of my name. It's showing up really nice with that white crayon there. So the relief actually did work. Okay, get some more off of here. I'm actually kind of happier with how this is turning out when I'm removing it damp still. Just the colors I'm getting. But I think it might also just be because I went over it a couple more times with the paintbrush. Let's see, the confetti's really hard to get off. As you can see, fingers getting color all over them. All right, so this is what we've got so far. Still got some of the little confetti pieces. But as you can see, I didn't totally cover my name with the tissue paper, so the white crayon effect isn't really taking hold. But as you can notice, I've got some wet paint here still. So I'm gonna just take a moment here and just kind of cover that up so that the rest of my name is visible. I'm gonna rinse that out, get some more color here. Because yeah, since that is all still damp, I can have a lot more creative control with it than I might have if it were dry. I'd probably have to start reapply and do it. Let's see. But yeah. Okay, so there we go. So yeah, I just got my paintbrush. I took advantage that some of that color was still, you know, some of that paint was still wet and just took advantage of that and kind of spread it around. And so now you can see my whole name with that white crayon. So as you can see, we got an interesting purple there with the blue and the red because I layered them together. It's not really the purple I was hoping for, but it did turn out. The confetti pieces, I think next time if I did this, I would let them dry on their own before peeling them off, just because the colors got very it didn't get those crisp lines I was hoping for. It's just kind of a blob now. So I might do it a little differently. But as you can see, very simple, very basic. There's a lot of different ways that you can apply this. Like I was saying, I really do recommend looking up some different ways that people do bleeding tissue paper painting online. Get inspired that way. But thank you so much for joining me today. Like I said, these kits are available July 17th through July 31st at our various library locations while supplies last. Please feel free to give us a call and inquire about whether we have any kits left. And thank you so much for joining us. Please do feel free to check on our website, mesacountylibraries.org, for other events and special things that we're having happen this summer at Mesa County Libraries. And if you haven't yet, please do sign up for summer reading. It's the mid-July, but there's still time to get things done, because even if you're not a great reader, there's a variety of ways to earn points this summer to get various prizes and things. So you know, it's not just about reading this summer, it's about a variety of activities, including attending our online virtual events. That's one way that you can get points. So thanks again for joining me today. And I would love to see some pictures of your creations, by the way, if you're inclined to send those in. Since I really love looking at what people make during craft time, and I don't really get to have that right now since I'm just talking to a screen. So feel free to send us pictures of what you've been making. So thanks for joining us and have a great day. Bye.